Hello and welcome to the Two Lives of Rube Goldberg post-film discussion as part of this year's Twin Cities Jewish Film Festival. I am Robin Awind, and I have had the great pleasure of working on this multifaceted project for the past 3 years, featuring concurrent Rube Goldberg exhibitions now open at the Minnesota JCC galleries, including a larger-than-life Rube Goldberg machine, as well as this remarkable documentary by Rube's youngest grandson, St. Paulite and filmmaker, Jeffrey George. This dynamic team behind this project has been working passionately to bring this exciting project to our community. A special thank you to Catherine Tane, Larry Pepper, Tom Lieberman, Jeffrey George, and Robin Schwartzman for your vision, dedication, and creativity every step of this incredible journey. A heartfelt thank you to all of our sponsors and community partners, and there are many: Ramon, the Minnesota Jewish Arts Council, Bryn Jewish Arts Endowment Fund, St. Louis Park Friends of the Arts and the City of St. Louis Park Community Foundation, Boston Scientific, Mary and Julius Pertzik Cultural Arts Fund, Catherine and Jeffrey Tane, Phil and Tammy Rosenblum, Carrie and Brad Lehrman, Edward Ratner and Mark Ratner, Rube Goldberg Inc., and Abrams Comic Arts. Your generous support allows us to elevate Jewish voices and experiences through film and allows us to bring incredible Jewish cultural arts offerings to the broadest possible audience. And thank you to each of you for supporting the festival and being part of the dialogue by joining us today. Today's conversation, led by Tom Lieberman, will explore the two lives of Rube Goldberg from the perspective of Jeffrey George, Rube's youngest grandson. Tom Lieberman is a multifaceted performer, producer, and creative director. He embarked on a long-standing association with Garrison Keillor's A Prairie Home Companion, has provided creative and production services for Henson, PBS, Disney, and Discovery, as well as many Fortune 500 companies. And he was executive producer and music supervisor for the independent feature film Sweetland. Tom is also the creator of everybody's favorite talking ukulele, Luke the Uke, and serves as the creative and production consultant on the Rube Goldberg development team. Jeffrey George is a filmmaker and photographer. He brings a broad spectrum of experience to the table. He has shot feature films, commercials, and award-winning documentaries through the United States and abroad. He is Rube Goldberg's youngest grandson and the director of today's documentary film, The Two Lives of Rube Goldberg. As we begin the conversation, you are invited to put your questions into the chat. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the discussion and answering questions towards the end. Thank you all again so much for being here. And in true Rube spirit, we invite you to enjoy, to learn, and to be inspired. Tom?
Thank you, Robin. And hello, everybody. Thank you so much for watching the film. We hope you enjoyed it. I'm very happy to start this conversation with its director, Jeff George. So Jeff, hello there, buddy. Thank you.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Very good, very good. We're happy to get to this day. We've been working on this for quite some time, and I would say that, you know, the past year or somewhat less, we've been giving this a lot of attention. But a story like this, I mean, it seemed to me that as we were getting into it, the story started to expand and it started to gain dimension. You know, can you describe when you started out to make this film? Do you feel like the purpose of the film changed, or that the intent or the process sort of the story grew in the telling?
At first, I'd just like to thank everybody that was a part of both the show and helping out with the film. Robin, Tom, yourself, Larry Pepper, Catherine Tane. Who am I forgetting?
I think you got the
Schwartzman. I think that the whole process was fairly organic in nature, and
it seemed to me kind of like, the story of Rube Goldberg, it's like peeling an onion, it just
Yeah,
like,
it is. I mean, when we first started talking about this was the way this whole project got started was I spoke to Robin because I have in my possession, between my brother, my cousin, and myself, we have the lion's share of available Rube Goldberg original material that's available to the public, or that the public owns. The rest of it is at University of Southern California. And so there have been several shows and traveling shows and so on over, around the country. And I said, hey, I've got this stuff here. Would you like to do a show of it? And Robin jumped at the idea, and then COVID hit. And then it was a discussion of, okay, we're going to make this a virtual show instead, because we don't, things were very drastic at the time. And then we said, well, what about making a film about it? And so it would turn from a virtual show into a documentary with really kind of, we didn't really know where the show was going at the time. And then they both just kind of, came to fruition together.
did you imagine? Did it seem like at the beginning it sort of like seemed like a simple proposition? It's like, I've got this collection, I'll tell the story.
Here you go, hang it up,
Right.
see what you can do. And
How complex could it be?
Yeah, how complex could it be? And then, in some of the first discussions about making the film, I had kind of wanted to have a thread through the film. And the idea was to build this machine and use that as the thread through the film. And that didn't quite, pan out the way that I thought. I mean, thank God it didn't, because it was a better way of doing it. But the end result was that we did create the machine, which is such a wonderful part of the exhibit. And it served its purpose, but, from a different angle, a lot of it. In thinking about the film, like I've said in the film, is that, I growing up, I didn't really know my grandfather that well. He died when I was about 10 years old. And I didn't really understand or I thought the whole thing was kind of silly, quite honestly. I didn't know who Rube Goldberg was really. And people would say, oh, you're Rube Goldberg's grandkid, or I'd hear something about my dad or something like that. And I just was almost embarrassed, I would say, because I just had no understanding of it. And but what really got me fired up about the whole thing was getting involved with the Rube Goldberg machine contests and watching that, and talking at my son's school and my daughter's school, and kind of getting involved with the whole kind of Rube Goldberg Inc. thing that my cousin is the main driver behind. But when I went to these live events, and if anybody can ever go to a live event, I suggest you go to it. I've said this in the film too, is the energy and the creativity and the collaboration, all of the stuff that goes on there. It's just super fun. And that's what really, energized me in the whole thing. And then the backstory of who Rube is, and it basically was revealed that, that Rube does really have two lives. He has his, the obvious one where he was alive, and then this kind of recreation after his death, which is in part a lot to do with machine contests, whether they're sponsored or not, or advertising, or just the definition of his name being used quite a lot.
Yes,
but in then actually making the film, I really understood part of it was, people are deeply famous during their lifetimes mostly, and very few of them are able to, carry that fame on into future generations. And Rube was one of those guys that was deeply famous in his time, but then, he had a very, dormant period before he came back as something almost completely different.
So during the process of making this film, do you feel like you've come to understand your grandfather differently?
Yeah.
How so?
I understand that he was tremendously talented. He was tremendously prolific. He was very funny, seems like. When I knew him, he was pretty old, so he wasn't that funny. He was
hey, wait a second.
Well,
you guys can be funny.
And he wasn't as lively as I see some of the stuff, some of his photographs, and some of some of the stories and such, he just was an older guy at that time, and and I didn't really pay a heck of a lot of attention to it anyway at the time. I was a young kid, and growing up, the main part of the family lived in Manhattan, and we lived in New Jersey, and so that Manhattan part of the family on my uncle's side, they had much more contact with Rube than we did.
So, you talk about how you, as the younger of the grandchildren, you didn't really have him in your life as much as perhaps your brother John or your cousin Jennifer did.
Oh, my brother John. So my father was married, he's my brother John is my half brother. And when my father remarried to my mother, there was a period of time where he went abroad, and John spent a lot of times in summers with Rube and Irma. So he would, like he says, they were kind of his second parents for sure. And then Jennifer spent more time with Rube. She's a little bit older than I am. Plus, the proximity made a big difference, I believe, as well.
It's interesting because you in the film you talk about how you experienced your grandfather after his life. You started to get to know him by his reputation as interpreted by others. People thinking that he was a Union grip or something like that. But through the making of the film, and I kind of witnessed this, I saw you kind of, it seemed like you were telling your grandfather's story, but you were also understanding that some of it, in a lot of it, is your story. It's a story about your family that you didn't know.
Yeah.
So was there?
The story of our family? It's like just any other family.
Right.
One of the interesting things is the impact that a prominent individual has on other members of the family and how they respond to that. My uncle, who also he was involved in producing plays and some films and stuff, moved very much towards my grandfather's type of sense of popularity and so on, where my father, on the other hand, reacted the opposite way. He became an artist and didn't become part of that family. He did his own thing, and I think that was a response, because I don't think he particularly liked being. My father was an artist. He showed New York for years, and he did pretty well. But the third line in any descriptive review of his work was that he was the grandson of Rube Goldberg.
Right.
And I think that bothered him quite a bit.
The son of Rube Goldberg.
Yeah, the son of Rube Goldberg.
Yeah.
And so I think to a certain extent I used to always shy away from that.
Sure. Do you think that's just kind of the legacy of people who come, or the progeny of famous people, is that they want to individuate themselves?
Yeah, sure it is. It just depends on how you react to it, and especially if I was the grandson of I don't know, some big famous person, that I might take it, but I was the grandson of somebody I didn't understand.
Yeah,
I didn't understand why. So I felt like I was so I didn't really gravitate towards that. So through this film, I've got a much greater appreciation for who he was as a person. I also kind of understand my father a little bit better as well, and my uncle. All of these people are deceased, so their stories are dead with them. But this has kind of enlightened me to the relationship. It's also helped. My cousin and I are quite close now. We've been pretty close, but we're closer now. And it's I'd say the rest of the family is doing really, really well in terms of just getting along with one another. It's not that we did not get along with one another. So it's just been a good thing all the way around.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about how the family name has changed over the years, and the fact that your father was Thomas George and not Thomas Goldberg. What was the genesis of that change?
Well, there's two stories, but I think the main one is that he was getting some death threats at one point, and he didn't want to deal with that.
And those death threats were because of
some of, I think, his political cartoons were pretty controversial, and you know, he had some specific ideas around things, and it was also the time he was living in as well. I think the other story is that he didn't want his kids to grow up as the son of Rube Goldberg, which, if you look back on my perspective, it's like, well, okay, well, who is Rube Goldberg? Why are you going to be so worried about being called the son of Rube Goldberg when I don't even understand who the guy was? So that was silly to me. But those are the two stories that have been told to me. They had a realty company, and it was called Tom and George Realty. And so I think Rube liked Tom George as a name, and so my uncle got stuck with George. Go figure. But I guess that's the first son thing. I don't know. He probably was resentful against that first one. But I guess he liked it, and it worked for him in the show business and stuff. But that's the name they came up with, and yeah.
Yeah, wild. Yeah, it must have been quite a family. You know, it's interesting. You were talking about how, you know, it makes me think of like Charlie Hebdo in France. You know, where cartoons can set off this. You know, it's like they're considered sort of light entertainment, yet they are very incisive and very often hit nerves. And you know, we talk again in film about how Rube sort of changed his pursuit from that of really being entertainment and satirical to being political, or editorial, shall we say, and doing editorial cartoons. And that's just for the audience, kind of the turning point of the two exhibits that we're doing, because we looked at the collection that you had to exhibit, and we realized that a large body of the work is sort of Rube's early career, with all of his panels and all of his characters and all of his wacky inventions, which were, of course, you know, the centerpiece. But then he takes that turn in the late 30s, and he turns to editorial cartooning. And it seemed like such a different thing, whereas in his contraptions and such, he was taking simple tasks and making them complex. But with the political cartoons, he was doing the inverse. He was taking the complex political landscape and simplifying it into a single frame. I've always kind of wondered, when I realized that change happened in 1938, I was wondering if just the politics of the world were such that he just felt it needed his attention. Like this is where he wanted to focus.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. You know, he was very prolific throughout his career, and like a lot of artists, you know, artists have periods where they're interested in one thing, and then they kind of lose interest in that, and it goes somewhere else. And I you know, I was always I got to be under the impression that Rube was, you know, I say this in the film too, where he wasn't very encumbered with doubt. I mean, he was a doer, not a talker. And so he just went, you know, he tried different things. And if it didn't work out, he tried something else. And he did try quite a few different strips that didn't take hold. But he just kept doing what he did. And, you know, you can see this from, you know, the conventions, and then you can see it with the political cartoons where he's more specific. But even in the inventions, he'll throw in a dictator, or he'll throw in something that has something to do with something that's going on, whether it's taxes or you know, something everybody can identify with, like something to do with their spouses or something like that. So there's always a little piece of editorial commentary going on in there. And then that just become a simplification when he moved into political cartoons. And then if you look at his sculptures, they're also like, you know, still frames of observations that have some type of editorial comment to them as well. A lot of them do. So He's always got some kind of a comment going on, whether it's direct or not so direct. You can find this interview of him on I believe the Smithsonian Archives website that was done in collaboration with the show that they did down there, and that's where I pulled those sound bites of him talking. And there's a lot more into that. It's quite interesting. And he talks about the political cartoons not so much as with a less fondness than the invention stuff or anything else. But it seems like to me that he felt like he was compelled to do it. And once he was done doing it, he was done with it. He didn't proceed anymore. And I think at that time they piddled around for a little bit, but he moved into the sculpture. And a lot of people say there's stuff in the documentary around that he was getting older and then he was this and that, and that may be true too. But I also think that it was time to change again.
Yeah, I mean, everything he did, it doesn't seem like he ever rested on his laurels.
No, and if you look,
something.
So my dad, I mean, he has like 5 or 6 different periods in his life too of his paintings. And if you looked at each painting, you wouldn't think it was the same artist. Mm-hmm. So that was the same kind of character trait with him as he was with my father.
But there is a through line. Having looked at all of his work, there definitely is a through line, and it seems to be a point of view.
It's a very distinct point of view. Yes, it's a very distinct. Sometimes it's narrow, and other times it's more inclusive. But it is very much. That's very true. Yes. And it wasn't particularly. I think the view was never. It was, sorry, I'm losing the word here. It was very inclusive and very gentle and sometimes humorous and then a little bit biting, but he never really got crazy. Mm-hmm. He was always, he appealed to the general public quite well.
Yeah. It's fascinating because, Al Jaffe said it. They talk about newspapers as being, it was the hot medium of mass media. They're really, what other mass media was there at that point? Radio was just coming in probably. And I think about him coming into New York in 1907 from San Francisco, from, the great big city in the West, but coming to, he described it, I think, as he wanted to move to the front row. He wanted to sit in the front row and see the world as it was really the cutting edge. But just kind of the energy with which he clearly landed in New York and just kind of made it happen. They talk about him, with the I'm the Guy, where he created this meme and then he writes this song, and, he was in vaudeville, he was in film. He was in an embodiment of kind of a superstar of that day and really what popular entertainment was.
Right. And Charlie Kochman says a good thing about that, where he says that, you couldn't find a cartoonist these days that would be hanging out with the same type of people Rube was hanging out with, right. Just because of the sheer fact that that's not where a lot of attention is anymore. So, but I think he just, it's basically just a story of like many others, of individuals who have got an idea and got a vision, and they run with it, and it appeals to a certain group of people or a certain number of people, and they're successful, and and then it just builds from there.
Well, he also it was amazingly prolific. I mean, I just alluded to that earlier, but yes. I think of the energy, and everything he did was built by hand. I mean, there were no shortcuts to what he was doing.
No, I mean, you look at the inventions, and it's like there's not a to make all this stuff work in the way it's supposed to work, and the amount of distance that you need between each caricature and drawing and so on and so forth. I mean, I've seen a couple of his rough sketches, but I'm not too sure how many iterations there are before he just draws the darn thing. And
gotta be dozens.
I don't know. I don't know. And the other thing I think that we're overlooking too, when we look at him, is we look at his drawings, but if you look at his writing, I mean, half of this stuff is writing, and it's creating it, and the way he puts it all together is something. And it's in our day and age, if you can't look at something and grasp it within 2 seconds, nobody's interested. So, in other words, to sit and actually look at an invention, read through it, understand it, activate your imagination so that you can relate to it. It takes several minutes. And, unfortunately, very few of us have that kind of patience anymore to look at stuff like that.
Well, it's all conditioning, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
But no, he was. If you just were to read the panels that accompanied his cartoons, or the descriptive copy, or the dialogue, it's hilarious in and of itself.
Yes, it is. It is, and one of the things that I've always loved since I was a little kid, actually, is these little characters that are in his cartoons, like little guys sitting in the corner, little dwarves, and whatever, some kind of funny animal or something. And he has these guys all over the place, and they're very, very funny. They're entertaining. I have a couple of friends of mine that have tattoos of them, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really? That's a commitment.
A friend of mine asked me to borrow one of the cartoons so we could show it to a tattoo artist to put it down. Yeah, so
it was amazing, because I think Catherine Tane had mentioned this as she was doing so much of the research, and we were looking at these giant full sheet panels that you have of like what would be an entire page of a Sunday newspaper, and it was like looking at a cartoon of vaudeville, because it was different little features all around the page, and there might be the above the crease was a Boob McNutt cartoon, and beneath it was something else, and in the corner was the wacky animals, or it's just, in addition to his inventions, which he's so famous for, there was just so much creativity, and he just threw it out there. It was great.
Tons of it. I mean, it's you take the time to go through the Art of Rube Goldberg, the book. There's a lot of great stuff in there. That you really it's a thick thing. You gotta really.
I think we should plug that, because Abrams Comic Arts and Rube Goldberg Incorporated couldn't have been more generous in the support.
Couldn't have done this film without it.
Yeah, no, they added so much, and just looking at the book that Jennifer and Charles and their team put together, and the family, it's just a beautiful, beautiful book, and I highly recommend it to everyone. In addition, but that doesn't preclude going to see the exhibit at the Minneapolis and St. Paul JCCs. So I guess, Jeff, before we turn it back to Robin and say goodbye, is there anything that any takeaway that you've learned about your grandfather through this process, or learned about trying to tell the story of your grandfather that you would
one of the takeaways I would just say is that if you, it's my cousin calling me right now.
Oh, say hello.
If you don't know your family well enough, take time to get to know them, and preferably when they're alive.
Yeah.
That's something that I missed out on several different relatives and so on and so forth, and it's a regret of mine. So, but at least, fortunately enough, there's enough written about my grandfather that I can get to know him.
Yeah. And your cousin seems to be pretty accessible too. She just called you.
Oh no, she's accessible. She's always got a million things going on. So shameless plug for RubeGoldberg.com. Go on the website if you're interested in getting any family members or something involved in the contest. We're always looking for people to play along.
So okay, and I think with that we will say thank you to everyone for watching. Thank you so much for the sweet comments that are coming through on the chat.
Yes, thank you.
We appreciate it. And thank you all so much. We just want to give it back to Robin and say good afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thanks, Jeff.
Couldn't have done it without you.
Thanks so much, Jeff and Tom, for this wonderful and meaningful conversation beyond and behind the screen. We want to invite everyone to stop by the Minnesota JCC galleries, as Tom mentioned. The Sabis JCC Center in Minneapolis has Simplicity Made Complex, the life and legacy of Rube Goldberg, which features Rube's life and career with an emphasis on his trademark machines. Also on display at the Sabis Center by local artist Robin Schwartzman is a machine to water a plant while you are out, which starts with a cell phone ringing and ends with a flower being watered, and lots of fun steps in between, which I will not spoil for you. You have to just see it in person for yourself. And at the Cap Center in St. Paul, the exhibit Complexity Made Simple, the political cartoons of Rube Goldberg, focuses on Rube's political cartooning and his ability to distill a complex geopolitical landscape into a single image. Additionally, I just want to put a little plug in for the work that's on display at both JCC hallway exhibition areas, work by Thomas George, Rube's son, Jeff's father, whose abstract paintings and drawings are in numerous collections of the world's leading cultural institutions. So we have a wonderful generational artistic lineage combination happening at both of our centers. So much more about Rube and this project can be found on the Minnesota JCC website. And if you have been moved by your experience, making a gift is easy and secure at givetothejcc.org. And on that note, I just want to thank you all again so much for being here to support this project and to support the arts in our community. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you.